Hello, everyone, and welcome to ASMR Crime Chronicles. My name is Lydia, and tonight we'll be taking a calm, thoughtful look at another fascinating true crime mystery. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that the cases discussed on this channel involve real people and real families. The purpose of these videos is not to sensationalize tragedy, but to explore the facts, the investigations, and the unanswered questions that continue to surround these stories. So, get comfortable, settle in, and let's begin. Some people disappear without leaving a trace. Others spend years carefully planning how they will disappear. By the late 1970s, Leo Koury had become one of Richmond, Virginia's most successful nightclub owners. To many people, he was a respected businessman, a generous employer, an active member of his church, a familiar face throughout the city. But according to investigators, another side of Leo Koury's life existed behind closed doors, one built on intimidation, extortion, violence, and fear. As federal investigators gathered evidence, they believed they had uncovered an organization responsible for racketeering, fraud, attempted murder, and even murder itself. An indictment was coming, the evidence was mounting, and it appeared that Koury's world was about to collapse. Then, one day before federal charges were announced, Leo Koury vanished. He allegedly left Richmond with a fortune in cash. Friends didn't know where he had gone. Investigators searched across the United States. Sightings poured in from South America, the Middle East, and beyond. Years passed. The FBI's file continued to grow, yet the man they sought remained one step ahead. How could someone disappear so completely? And if Leo Koury was still alive, who had he become? Tonight, we'll explore the remarkable story of Leo Koury, a businessman, a fugitive, and one of the FBI's longest-running manhunts. Long before his name appeared on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, Leo Koury was known throughout Richmond as a successful businessman. Beginning in the 1950s, he built a thriving collection of restaurants, bars, and nightclubs. At a time when many establishments openly discriminated against gay patrons, Koury recognized an opportunity that few others were willing to pursue. He opened and operated several bars that became gathering places for Richmond's gay community. Among the most well-known were Leo's, the Dial Tone, and the 409 Club. For many patrons, these businesses offered something difficult to find elsewhere, a place where they could socialize openly during a period when acceptance was far from guaranteed. Koury reportedly embraced that role. He even referred to himself as the godfather of the gay community. To customers and employees, he often appeared charismatic, confident, generous. People who knew him frequently described him as intelligent and personable. He volunteered as a softball umpire. He was active in his church. He raised 4 children with his wife, Jeanette. By all outward appearances, Leo Koury seemed to embody success. Yet investigators would later argue that beneath this respectable image lay a much darker reality. As Richmond's nightlife expanded during the early 1970s, new competitors began opening clubs of their own. For the first time, Koury's dominance faced a serious challenge. According to prosecutors, that competition marked a turning point. Witnesses would later claim that rivals were threatened, businesses were intimidated, and acts of violence began surrounding the city's growing nightclub scene. At first, these incidents appeared isolated, but over time, investigators began seeing a pattern, one that would eventually lead them toward allegations of organized criminal activity. By the late 1970s, federal investigators believed they were no longer examining individual crimes. They believed they were uncovering an entire criminal enterprise, and at its center, they alleged, was Leo Koury. By the mid-1970s, Leo Koury had become one of the most recognizable figures in Richmond's nightclub scene. His businesses were thriving. His influence appeared to be growing, and to many people, he seemed untouchable. But success often attracts attention. As new nightclub owners began opening businesses throughout Richmond, competition increased. For the first time in years, Koury's dominance of the local nightlife industry was being challenged. According to federal investigators, that competition was not always welcomed. Witnesses would later tell authorities that rival business owners were threatened. Employees reported feeling intimidated. Some competitors claimed they were pressured to abandon plans or sell their businesses. At first, these incidents appeared unrelated. Arguments between business owners were hardly unusual, but as investigators continued collecting information, they began noticing striking similarities. The same names appeared repeatedly, the same businesses, the same pattern of intimidation. According to prosecutors, what initially seemed like isolated disputes gradually revealed something much larger. Federal authorities alleged that Koury had organized a criminal enterprise designed to protect his business interests. Witnesses described an atmosphere in which fear became a powerful tool. Some individuals claimed they had been assaulted. Others reported threats against themselves or their families. Investigators also began examining suspicious fires, bombings, and acts of vandalism connected to competing businesses. Whether each incident could be directly linked remained a matter for the courts to decide, but collectively, they convinced investigators that a much broader investigation was necessary. As federal agents interviewed former employees, business associates, and witnesses, the picture continued to expand. Financial records were examined. Telephone calls were analyzed. Relationships between individuals became clearer. Little by little, investigators believed they were uncovering an organized network rather than isolated criminal acts. The investigation would eventually involve allegations of racketeering, extortion, mail fraud, tax violations, attempted murder, and murder. For the FBI, this was no longer simply an investigation into one businessman. It had become a major organized crime case. And with every new witness, the evidence appeared to grow stronger. By the late 1970s, federal prosecutors believed they were approaching the moment they had been working toward for years. An indictment was being prepared. Search warrants were ready. Arrests were expected. Investigators believed the case was finally coming together. There was only one problem. Someone appeared to know what was about to happen, because before federal agents could make their move, Leo Koury disappeared. By the late 1970s, federal investigators believed they had spent years assembling a comprehensive case against Leo Koury and several of his associates. Witnesses had come forward. Financial records had been examined. Telephone records had been analyzed. Federal prosecutors believed they were finally ready. According to investigators, an indictment charging Koury and numerous associates with racketeering and other federal offenses was imminent. For years, the investigation had unfolded quietly behind the scenes. Now, it was about to become public, federal agents prepared arrest warrants. Search warrants were organized. Investigators believed the operation would bring an end to what they described as a criminal enterprise that had operated for years within Richmond's nightlife industry. But events took an unexpected turn. On the day before the indictments were scheduled to be announced, Leo Koury vanished. To friends and family, his disappearance was sudden. Some believed he had simply left town for business. Others suspected he had learned about the impending charges. Investigators would later conclude that Koury appeared to have anticipated the arrests before they occurred. Exactly how he may have learned of the investigation has remained a subject of speculation. What was clear was that, by the time federal agents were ready to move, the man they considered the central figure in the case was already gone. Authorities believed Koury had taken a substantial amount of cash with him. Without relying on bank accounts or credit cards, investigators knew he could potentially remain hidden for a long time. The search began immediately. Airports were alerted. Border agencies received descriptions. Federal investigators contacted law enforcement agencies throughout the United States. As news of Koury's disappearance spread, reports of possible sightings began arriving. Some callers claimed they had seen him in Florida. Others believed he had traveled to South America. Still others suggested he had fled to the Middle East, where members of his extended family had roots. Each lead was carefully investigated. Some appeared promising. Most ended in disappointment. Weeks turned into months. Months became years. Despite the enormous resources devoted to locating him, Leo Koury remained missing. The businessman who had once been one of Richmond's most recognizable public figures had seemingly disappeared without leaving a trace. For investigators, one question became increasingly difficult to answer. Had Leo Koury simply become another fugitive, or had he successfully created an entirely new life, somewhere beyond the reach of American authorities? When Leo Koury disappeared, federal investigators believed the search might last days, perhaps weeks. Instead, it stretched into years. As the investigation expanded, the FBI began receiving reports from across the United States and around the world. Some witnesses believed they had seen Koury living quietly in Florida. Others claimed he had traveled to Central or South America. Still others suggested he had returned to the Middle East, where members of his extended family had roots. Each tip offered hope, and each required careful investigation. Agents followed paper trails, interviewed witnesses, compared photographs, examined financial records, and searched for any indication that Koury had used an alias to begin a new life. But every promising lead seemed to dissolve. The farther investigators searched, the more difficult the task became. Unlike many fugitives, Koury was believed to have left with substantial financial resources. According to investigators, that money may have allowed him to travel without relying on employment or public assistance. Without obvious financial records to follow, locating him became significantly more challenging. As the years passed, the case remained active. Koury's photograph continued appearing on wanted posters. His file remained open. Investigators refused to close the case simply because time had passed. To them, it remained a matter of justice. Meanwhile, rumors continued to circulate. Some believed Koury had undergone cosmetic surgery. Others suggested he had assumed a completely new identity. There were stories that he had become involved in businesses overseas, stories that he was living comfortably under another name, and stories that he had died years earlier. Each rumor generated renewed interest. Each rumor required investigators to separate fact from speculation. For the FBI, patience became just as important as persistence. Years of searching had produced countless possibilities, yet very little certainty. Still, investigators believed that somewhere, somehow, Leo Koury had left behind evidence. A document, a witness, a mistake, something that would eventually reveal where he had gone. What they did not yet know was that the answer would come from an unexpected source, not from an international tip, not from a dramatic arrest, but from a quiet discovery that would finally reveal what had become of one of Richmond's most elusive fugitives. For years, the mystery surrounding Leo Koury's disappearance continued to grow. Investigators pursued leads across continents. Rumors placed him in South America, the Middle East, Europe. Almost anywhere someone believed they had seen a familiar face. But as the years passed, those reports became less frequent. The manhunt slowly shifted from an active pursuit to a long-term investigation. Still, the FBI never officially abandoned the case. Koury's file remained open. His name remained associated with one of Richmond's most significant organized crime investigations. Then, years after his disappearance, investigators finally received the answer they had been seeking. Not through an anonymous tip, not through an international arrest, but through the discovery of a death. Authorities learned that Leo Koury had been living under an assumed identity. Rather than continuing to move from country to country, investigators concluded that he had quietly established a new life, successfully avoiding detection for years. The discovery brought an end to one of the FBI's longest-running fugitive investigations involving Richmond's nightlife. For investigators, the case was both satisfying and frustrating. They finally knew what had happened to Leo Koury, but because of his disappearance, many of the criminal allegations against him would never be tested in court. There would be no trial, no testimony before a jury, no opportunity for prosecutors to present the full case they had spent years assembling. Likewise, there would be no legal verdict regarding the allegations made against him. Instead, the case remains remembered largely through investigative records, witness accounts, and the extraordinary circumstances surrounding his disappearance. Today, Leo Koury's story continues to fascinate historians and true crime enthusiasts alike. It is a story of ambition, influence, power, and the extraordinary lengths one man allegedly went to in order to avoid prosecution. It also serves as a reminder that disappearances are not always mysteries born of chance. Sometimes they are carefully planned, patiently executed, and successful for far longer than anyone could have imagined. Yet even then, time has a way of revealing the truth, sometimes quietly, sometimes unexpectedly, but almost always eventually. And that is why the story of Leo Koury continues to be remembered, not simply because he disappeared, but because his disappearance became one of the most remarkable fugitive stories ever featured on Unsolved Mysteries. Thank you for joining me for this episode of ASMR Crime Chronicles. As always, I'd like to remind everyone that the stories we discuss involve real people and real families, and they deserve to be remembered with dignity and respect. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and returning for future cases as we continue to explore mysteries, disappearances, and the investigations that surround them. Until next time, thank you for listening, and good night.
Still gotta get to 7. It was good. I think like the end, like you didn't need to keep going. Like some.
I thought it was good. I don't think it was like the most.
Right, the way people did. Right.